You know, sometimes the smallest things turn out to matter the most. I learned that truth from a story that happened right here in our own backyard. To a man who thought he had everything figured out, until one devastating night when it all came crashing down. His name was Richard Caldwell, and if you'd driven past the financial district any weekday morning 5 years ago, you might have seen him stepping out of his black Mercedes, adjusting his Rolex, briefcase in hand. 40 years old, dark hair with just a touch of gray at the temples, fit and confident. Richard had built his wealth faster than most. Smart investments, calculated risks, and yes, maybe a little bit of luck along the way. But here's the thing about luck. It doesn't always stick around. The office building where Richard worked stood 40 stories high, all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like it was made of diamonds. His corner office on the 38th floor had windows that overlooked the entire city. From up there, the world looked small, manageable, like something you could hold in the palm of your hand. Richard had always believed he was in control. He'd started with nothing at 25, worked his way up through sheer determination, and by 40 had become one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the city. Experience, he told himself, was worth more than gold. That particular Tuesday started like any other. His assistant, Margaret, who'd been with him for 8 years, brought him his usual black coffee at 7:30 sharp. "Morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said, setting the cup on his mahogany desk. "The volatility reports are ready for your review." "Thank you, Margaret." He barely looked up from his computer screen, where red numbers were starting to flash across his portfolio. By noon, those red numbers had spread like a fever. By 3 o'clock, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. By 5, Richard Caldwell had lost everything. It wasn't fraud. It wasn't a scam. It was a perfect storm. A technological glitch at the trading firm, combined with a sudden market crash in overseas markets, combined with automated trading systems that couldn't be stopped in time. His entire fortune, built over 15 years of relentless work, vanished in a matter of hours. The other executives had left by 6. Margaret had squeezed his shoulder before heading home, tears in her eyes. "It's going to be okay, Mr. Caldwell," she'd whispered, though neither of them believed it. Now it was nearly midnight, and Richard sat alone in his darkened office, staring at a computer screen that showed a balance of 0. Not 0 with 6 figures after it, just 0. He thought about his ex-wife, Jennifer, who'd left him 2 years ago, tired of coming second to his work. She would have said this was karma. Maybe she was right. Their daughter lived with her now, across town, and at 11 years old, she barely knew him anymore. He'd been too busy building an empire to notice his family slipping away. The building was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Everyone had gone home hours ago. Richard stood slowly, running his hands through his hair. Still thick, still dark, but he felt decades older than he had that morning. He left his briefcase on the desk. Seemed pointless to carry it. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Richard caught his reflection in the polished steel doors, a man at 40, who'd just watched his entire life's work disappear. Funny how quickly things could change. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he stepped into the marble lobby, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. He was halfway to the exit when he heard a voice. "Sir, excuse me, sir." Richard turned around. Standing by the security desk was a young woman, maybe 23 or 24, wearing a light blue janitorial uniform and bright yellow cleaning gloves. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, and there was something about her face, open, honest, kind, that reminded him of his daughter, though older. "Sir, you forgot this." She was holding a single piece of paper, slightly crumpled, like she'd found it on the floor. Richard almost waved her off. What could possibly matter now? But something in her expression made him walk back. Maybe it was just courtesy. Maybe it was the fact that she'd called him sir when he felt like anything but. He took the paper from her gloved hand. "Thank you, Miss Emma Patterson." She smiled, and it was genuine. "You're Mr. Caldwell, right? I've seen you come through here most mornings." "Used to," Richard said quietly, glancing down at the paper. It looked like a printout of an old email, dated nearly 15 years ago. The sender was someone named J. Morrison. The subject line read, "Hartford Property, Final Offer." His heart skipped. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice suddenly urgent. "It was stuck under your desk," Emma said. "I was vacuuming and saw it wedged way back there, like it had been there forever. Figured it might be important." Richard read the email again, his hands starting to shake. James Morrison. The Hartford property deal. He remembered it now, vaguely, like a dream from another lifetime. Morrison had offered to buy a small commercial property Richard owned outside Hartford, Connecticut. Richard had declined because the offer was too low. The property wasn't worth much. Just an old building on 3 acres. Something he'd bought when he was 25. his very first investment. But this email, the final paragraph said, Morrison was willing to negotiate up to double his original offer if Richard changed his mind within 30 days. Is everything okay? Emma asked, concern crossing her face. Richard looked up at her. This young woman in her janitorial uniform, who had no idea what she'd just handed him. I need to make a phone call. He made 3 phone calls that night, right there in the lobby while Emma finished her cleaning rounds. The first was to his lawyer. The second was to a real estate agent in Hartford. The third was to an old colleague who specialized in land development. By 2 in the morning, Richard had learned something extraordinary. The Hartford property he'd forgotten about, that shabby little building on 3 neglected acres, sat right in the path of a proposed interstate expansion. The state was buying up land along the corridor, and properties in that area had increased in value tenfold over the past decade. Richard still owned it. He'd paid the property taxes automatically through an old account he rarely checked, never giving it a second thought. That forgotten piece of land, purchased 15 years ago for $60,000, was now worth close to $2 million. It wouldn't replace everything he'd lost, but it was enough. Enough to start over. Enough to live on, carefully. Enough to prove that at 40, he wasn't finished yet. Emma was emptying a trash bin near the revolving doors when Richard approached her again. She looked up, surprised to see him still there. Mr. Caldwell, you okay? It's really late. Emma, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. Do you have any idea what you just did? She blinked, confused. I just found a paper on the floor. You found more than that. Richard sat down on one of the lobby benches, suddenly exhausted. I lost everything today. My whole fortune. I thought my life was over. Emma's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. That paper you gave me, it reminded me of a property I'd forgotten I owned. A property that's worth enough to give me a second chance. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the uniform to the person underneath. You saved my life tonight, Emma. I don't say that lightly. Emma sat down beside him, processing this. I was just doing my job, sir. No, Richard said gently. You were being thorough, careful. You paid attention to details that most people would have swept into the trash without a second glance. He paused. How long have you been working here? 2 years, Emma said. Nights, mostly. I'm studying during the day. Community college. Business administration. She smiled a little sheepishly. Hoping to work in an office like yours someday. Well, you know, before today. Richard felt something shift in his chest. Here was a young woman, working night shifts as a janitor, studying during the day, building her future one careful step at a time. She reminded him of himself at 25, hungry, hard-working, hopeful, before he'd gotten so caught up in the money that he'd forgotten what really mattered. Emma, he said slowly, when I get back on my feet, and I will, I'm going to need someone I can trust. Someone who pays attention. Someone who doesn't give up on people or throw away what might matter. He extended his hand. Would you be interested in learning the business? I mean, really learning it from the ground up? Emma stared at him, her eyes wide. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life. She shook his hand, her yellow glove still on, her grip firm and sure. Yes, sir. I'd like that very much. That was 5 years ago. Today, Richard Caldwell runs a modest but successful investment consulting firm. He'll never be as wealthy as he once was. Doesn't want to be, truth be told. He's learned that having enough is different from having everything, and enough suits him just fine. He's 45 now, with a little more gray in his hair and a lot more wisdom in his choices. He sees his daughter every weekend, never misses a school play or soccer game. He's rebuilding that relationship, one patient conversation at a time. Emma Patterson is his junior partner. She finished her degree, learned the business like she was born to it, and brought a fresh perspective that Richard didn't even know he needed. She's got good instincts, that girl. Sees things other people miss, just like she saw that crumpled paper under a desk when anyone else would have vacuumed right over it. They still work in the same building, though Richard's office is smaller now, on the 15th floor instead of the 38th. He doesn't miss the view. From where he sits, he can see the lobby, and sometimes he watches Emma arrive in the mornings, no longer in a janitorial uniform, but in a sharp business suit, carrying her own briefcase. She still calls him sir sometimes, out of habit, and it always makes him smile. Last week, Richard had dinner with his daughter, who's 16 now and thinking about colleges. She noticed he seemed different, lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened. "You seem happier, Dad," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I am," Richard told her. "I learned something important. It's not about how much you have. It's about paying attention to what matters. And it's about the people who show up when everything's falling apart, even if they're just doing their job." His daughter smiled. "I like this version of you better." "Me too, sweetheart," Richard agreed. "Me too." You know, I think about Richard and Emma sometimes, and what their story teaches us. We spend so much of our lives building, accumulating, climbing higher and higher. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all want security, want to provide for our families, want to feel like we've accomplished something. But sometimes we forget that the most valuable things aren't the ones we hoard. They're the ones we notice. The kindness of a stranger, the paper on the floor, the second chance we didn't know we needed. Richard didn't get his fortune back. Not the way it was. But he got something better. He got perspective. He got his daughter back. He got purpose. And he got to help someone else climb the ladder he'd once stood at the top of, teaching her not to make the same mistakes he had. Emma didn't rescue Richard that night by doing anything extraordinary. She rescued him by doing something simple: paying attention, being thorough, caring about the details that other people overlook. In a world that moves so fast, that's becoming a rare gift. So here's what I hope you'll take from this story. Don't throw away the papers under your desk, whether they're real or metaphorical. Pay attention to what you might be missing. Be kind to the people around you, because you never know when a simple gesture might change everything. And remember, it's never too late for a second chance, as long as you're willing to notice when one appears. Whether you're 40, 50, 60, or beyond, every day is a chance to start again. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people finding hope in unexpected places, and leave a comment below telling me about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference in your life. Take care of yourselves, friends, and keep your eyes open for those crumpled papers. You never know which one might change your world.